This question says, are couples that live together before they get married more likely to end up divorced within 5 years of marriage compared to couples that live apart before they get married? So they did a study, 204 of the 673 couples from the study who lived together before they got married were divorced within 5 years. 109 of the 454 couples from the study who lived apart before they got married were divorced within 5 years. What can be concluded at the alpha point 10? Okay, so how are you going to recognize this, like especially on the final where everything's there? How do we know what's going on? Well, we're comparing two groups. Do you see that? We're talking about couples that live together before they get married versus couples that live apart before they get married. So it's two groups. And we're saying which one is more likely to get divorced. So, and that means that's proportion, right? If one group is more likely to get divorced, then they have a higher percentage of divorce. So it's two proportions or percentages. Proportion is just the decimal, and percentage is percentage. They're both telling you a portion of something. So two proportions or two percentages, same things. That's what we're comparing. So if you go back to the notes, here we are in the exam 4 notes. We're talking about two proportions. Now there's, what are we going to use? The 2 prop z test on the calculator or the 2 prop z interval? Notice this finishes with test and this finishes with interval. This is for a confidence interval. We don't have a confidence interval right now. We have a hypothesis test. Hypothesis test. So from now on in the course, this last part of the course, every test we do will either end with every question we do, I should say, will either end with test or interval, because it's either a hypothesis test or a confidence interval. How do we know which one? Well, this hypothesis, see, it's got HO and H1 and all that, and it says test statistic, right? And it doesn't say confidence interval, right? The confidence interval will say form a 95% confidence interval, blah, blah, blah. Then you'll know. So this is a 2 prop z test we're going to use. We're not going to do that one right now. 2 prop z test, that's where we're going on the calculator. And so the answer we chose here, I've already got the answer here. It's a z test for the difference between two population proportions. How do we know it was z? Because it says right here in the notes. Z test, 2 prop z test, 2 proportions z test. There we go. Z test, 2 proportions. Okay, what's our HO and H1? Well, it tells you right in the notes. HO is the 2 proportions are equal. See how there's 2 proportions now? That's what's new here. We're talking about 2 groups. This is 2 groups. And remember, HO is always equal, huh? And H1 is greater, less, or not equal. Oops. There we go. So, and that'll always be the case. All the rest of the semester, HO will always be equal and H1 will always be greater, less, or not equal. They're the 2 different attorneys arguing. So HO is saying the 2 populations are equal, the 2 proportions are equal. In other words, chance of getting divorced, whether you live together before marriage or not, is equal. Versus H1 is saying, no, P1's greater or P1's less, or they're not equal. You know, one's bigger, one's smaller, they're just different. So that's what we're trying to figure out. So get back to the question. So in this case, it's going to be P1 equal. It's always equal here. And H1, P1, P2. Now, is it greater, less, or not equal? You can see right here, it's greater. Why is it greater? Well, see what it says right here? More likely. That's greater. This is population 1. This is population 2. And more likely means greater. Greater is more likely. Now, if they said less likely, then it would be less, right? More is greater, less is less. Now, if they say same, different, it would be not equal, right? Because we'd be testing, hey, is there the same percentage of divorce or is it not equal? Are they equal? That'd be same. Or are they not equal? That'd be different, right? So those are the different kind of versions you'll see. So this one says more likely. Are the couples that live together more likely to end up divorced? Greater. Okay. Now we go to the calculator. We're going to get test statistic and p-value. There's the answers already. Let's go. So how are we going to do this on the calculator? We'll go back to the notes. Exam 4 notes says put in the successes, X1 and X2, and the total observations in one, in two for both samples. If you're given percentages, do something else. We don't have percentages on this one. All right, so we gotta basically do that. So let's go to the calculator and I will show you. We're gonna go to 2 prop Z test. We're gonna hit stat. And then we're going to go to wherever that is. I don't know. I can't remember. Let's go. We'll go to the calculator and then I'll come back. Well, actually, you know what? I could write it out ahead of time. Let me do that. So we're going to hit the stat button. Then we're going to go over to tests. Squeeze this in up here. And then we're going to go down to the 2 prop Z test, which is 6. It's number 6 on your list. Hit enter. So hit the stat button, go over to test, go down to number 6, 2 prop Z test, hit enter. As soon as you do, it will give you a nice little setup. It'll say X1 in 1. And I'll show this on the calculator in just a second. X2 in 2, and then it'll say P1 is not equal to P2 or less than P2 or greater than P2. And then it'll say calculate. Yeah, so what we're going to do then, we're going to put what's X1 and N1? Well, here's the first set of numbers. 204 out of 673, right? N's always the total. Got divorced. And then the second group, 109 out of 454. So first group, second group, right? X1 in 1, X2 in 2. X is always the thing we're looking for. N is the total. X is the thing. I noticed 204 got divorced out of 673 total for the first group. And for the second group, 109 got divorced out of 454 total. And then what are we going to do here? Not equal, less, greater. That just comes from right here, greater. So we'll choose greater, then go to calculate and hit enter. All right, I'm going to show that same thing right now. Get out of the way. There we go. There's the calculator. Turn it on. And so I'm going to go stat, go over to tests, go down to 2 prop Z test, which is number 6. Hit enter. There it is. So X1 is what? 204. Just type over whatever is already there. Enter. N1 is 673. Enter. X2 is 109. Enter. N2 is 454. Enter. And then we're going to go over to greater than. Right there. Go down to calculate. Enter. And there we go. There's the important information that we need. So we see there our test statistic, 2 point. That's see the Z up here at the top, 2.317. That's exactly what we had in our answer key. And the p-value, which is the first p, 0.0102. 0.0102. That's the information we need. All right, let's go back. To the problem. And there it is. Okay, and so how are we doing? Coming on down. So we got our p-value. So we're down to this step, right? So I wrote in the Z and the P, which were already there for us. It was, and it was Z. It was Z equals, it said Z right on the screen there. And then the p-value is 0.0102. And now we're going to compare the p-value to the alpha level. So we get the p-value. What's the alpha level? It says right here. Alpha level, 0.10. So, alpha level, significance level, it's also called 0.10. So what's the story? Ours is less, isn't it? Let me change the color there. It's less, right? Because 0.01 is certainly less than 10. So the p-value is less. This is exactly what it says right there. It's less than equal to, whatever, same thing. And so what do we do with less? Well, if it's helpful to you, go back. Here, let me show you what you might, if you're rusty at all on what that means, you can go back to the exam 3 notes. Let me actually do that real quick. Let me find those exam 3 notes and just go down to how we conclude a hypothesis test. Here we go. So this is the exam 3 notes. So even though we're on the exam 4 section, might be helpful to go back to the exam 3 notes because there's a conclusion based on whether p is less than alpha or greater than alpha. So what is it? What was ours? Ours was, whoops, I'm losing my spot. Less, right? P is less than alpha. So P is less than alpha right here. P is less than alpha. What does that mean? Keep H1, strong evidence, reject HO. So there we go. Reject HO, keep H1, strong evidence. So I'm going to reject the null, right? Just like it said, reject HO. Strong evidence and keep H1. Why are we keeping H1? Because we're rejecting HO. Remember, the HO and the H1 are the two attorneys that are arguing like a court of law. And the first attorney is saying, hey, those two populations are equal. In other words, the percentage of people that get divorced, whether they live together before marriage or not, is pretty much equal. And the other attorney is saying, no, it's not. The group that lives, the first group, which is the one that lives together before marriage, they have a higher, more likely rate of divorce than group 2. So the first attorney is saying, no, they're equal. Second attorney is saying, no, the first group is higher than the second group. And so what does the evidence say? Keep H1. Strong evidence, keep H1. So I'm going to keep H1, which means I'm going to grab what this attorney says, bring it down, I'm going to keep H1. What does he say? P1 is greater than P2. Great. That's what we believe. There's strong evidence that P1 is greater than P2, that those who live together, they're to the divorce, they have a higher divorce rate, those who live together, than the divorce rate among those who do not live together. So that's what we're saying, right? Because the first group, if you lose track, you just go back up. The first group, P1, is those who live together for marriage. P2 is a group that doesn't. So we're saying, no, the evidence shows that the first group that lives together for marriage is higher than the second group. The divorce rate's higher. So our conclusion is that the likelihood of getting divorced within 5 years of marriage for marriage couples that live together before they get married is what? Greater than. That's what H1 said. Greater than. That's where the evidence went. Greater than the likelihood of getting divorced for those who live apart. And so there we go.